Karoline Leavitt's journey is a powerful illustration of how compassion and persistence can shape the course of lives in unexpected ways. From the moment she stepped into the courtroom, armed with nothing but a worn leather folder and a deep belief in justice, her story demonstrated that true power often lies not in titles or formal education, but in the willingness to stand up for what's right, no matter the odds. Her act of defending Samuel Ross, a homeless veteran, was not just a legal battle. It was a fight for humanity, a fight for dignity, and a fight for someone who had long been forgotten by society. Karoline had no legal training. She wasn't an attorney, nor did she have any formal education beyond community college. To the outside world, she was just another young woman working in a diner, barely scraping by. So, when she decided to take on the city in defense of Samuel, many saw her decision as nothing short of naive. How could a waitress, someone who knew more about serving coffee than legal precedents, take on the system and expect to win? The odds were stacked against her. She was young, inexperienced, and lacked the resources most people would consider necessary to fight such a monumental battle. Yet, she was determined to fight for what was right. It all started when she met Samuel, a homeless veteran who was a regular at her diner. Samuel had served in Iraq, but the war had left its mark on him in ways that no one could see at first glance. He was quiet, often lost in his thoughts, and always polite. He never asked for anything more than a cup of coffee, black, no cream. But Karoline saw something more in him. She saw a man who had given his youth, his energy, and his life to a cause that was supposed to serve his country. And yet, he had returned home to find himself abandoned by the very system he had fought to protect. The city had promised housing for veterans, but those promises had fallen through, leaving Samuel to wander the streets, living in a makeshift shelter that the city's cleanup team eventually destroyed. It was a night when the diner's manager had kicked Samuel out for staying too long at his table that Karoline's frustration with the system boiled over. She followed Samuel out and offered him the sandwich she had secretly kept behind the counter. That act of kindness, simple, quiet, and unassuming, became the spark that ignited her determination to make a difference. Samuel didn't ask for much. He just wanted to be treated with respect and dignity, but the world had continuously failed him. The city had let him down, and so had the system that was supposed to care for people like him. Karoline couldn't stand by and do nothing. She made a decision that night. She would fight for Samuel, no matter how impossible it seemed. What followed was a series of sleepless nights spent poring over legal documents, statutes, and case law. She wasn't trained in law, but Karoline was resourceful. She spent hours at the library, researching veterans' rights and city policies. She learned about the legal framework that should have been protecting Samuel and, more importantly, the loopholes and failings that had allowed the system to neglect him. She didn't give up. The complexity of the legal language didn't deter her. It only pushed her further. Karoline wasn't trying to outwit the legal system. She was simply trying to make it work for a man who had been left behind. She wanted to show that the law wasn't just for the powerful or the educated. It was meant to protect everyone, especially those who couldn't fight for themselves. Her persistence paid off when she filed a lawsuit against the city. She showed up in court, unaccompanied by any attorney, armed only with a folder filled with her research. When she stood before Judge Renner, she was not the polished, confident figure one might expect of a seasoned lawyer. Instead, she was a young woman who had been told time and again that she didn't belong in the world of law. Her voice trembled at first, and her hands shook as she presented her case. But her belief in the righteousness of her cause made her strong. With every piece of evidence she presented, every piece of Samuel's story she told, her voice grew clearer, steadier, more confident. Judge Renner, initially skeptical, couldn't help but be impressed by her preparation. He had seen countless lawyers in his career, some more qualified than others, but Karoline's sincerity and clarity of her arguments made him pause. She wasn't just fighting for legal victory. She was fighting for a human being, a veteran who had been mistreated and ignored. This wasn't just another case. It was a reminder of why the law existed in the first place. It was to serve people like Samuel, people who had been forgotten in the bureaucracy of the system. Karoline's fight wasn't just about the letter of the law. It was about its spirit. She wasn't just challenging the city's policies. She was challenging the very foundation of justice itself. And in doing so, she made that justice personal, real, and impactful. The turning point came when Judge Renner, who had initially laughed at the notion of a young woman, without legal training representing herself, was stunned by Karoline's legal genius. It wasn't that she had used fancy legal terms or complex arguments. It was that she had used the simplest, most human of tools: compassion. She understood the system's failings, but more importantly, she understood that the people it was supposed to protect were not just statistics. They were individuals with stories, lives, and dignity. She humanized the case in a way that no amount of legal jargon could ever do. Her victory in the courtroom wasn't just a personal triumph. It was a victory for every person who had ever been dismissed or overlooked by the system. It showed that compassion, when paired with determination, could change lives. Karoline didn't just win a case. She created a ripple effect of kindness and humanity that extended far beyond the courtroom. She reminded everyone, especially the legal professionals who had dismissed her at first, that the law was about more than rules. It was about people. In the weeks and months that followed, Karoline's life changed in ways she never expected. She was offered a scholarship to study law, an opportunity she had never considered for herself. She accepted, not because she wanted to become a lawyer in the traditional sense, but because she wanted to continue fighting for those who needed a voice. Her victory had never been about gaining fame or recognition. It had always been about making a difference. Her actions reminded the world that no matter how unqualified you might feel, no matter how impossible the odds may seem, kindness and persistence are forces that can change the world. Karoline's story is a reminder that sometimes the most profound acts of courage come not from those who are experts in their fields, but from those who care deeply enough to fight for what's right. The power of compassion and persistence lies in the belief that everyone, no matter their background, no matter their training, has the ability to stand up for justice and make a meaningful impact on the world. Karoline didn't have the credentials of a lawyer, but she had something far more valuable: a heart full of compassion and a determination to change the lives of those who needed it most. The heart of the story lies in Karoline Leavitt's determination to stand up for what is right, regardless of the overwhelming odds stacked against her. In the face of an unjust system, Karoline becomes a symbol of the belief that one person, armed with compassion, conviction, and the willingness to take action, can make a transformative difference. Her willingness to take on the legal system, despite her lack of qualifications or resources, exemplifies the importance of standing up for others, especially those who have been marginalized or forgotten. When Karoline met Samuel Ross, a homeless veteran who had been failed by the system, she saw not just a man struggling to survive on the streets, but a person who had given everything for his country, only to be cast aside by the very society that he fought for. Samuel was more than just a statistic or a nameless face in the crowd to Karoline. He was a man with a story, with a history, and with a future that was being denied to him by bureaucracy and neglect. Karoline's decision to fight for Samuel was not just an act of kindness. It was a deep, unwavering belief that every individual deserves to be treated with dignity, no matter their circumstances. The emotional weight of standing up for someone like Samuel cannot be understated. The government and the systems in place had promised housing, care, and support to veterans like him, but had failed to deliver. The promises made to Samuel were empty, and he had been left to fend for himself, abandoned by the same system that had sent him off to war. When Karoline realized the depth of this injustice, it stirred something inside her. It ignited a sense of responsibility, one that pushed her to act when most people might have turned a blind eye. Karoline's response was not only a personal stand against injustice, but also a universal call for compassion. By choosing to fight for Samuel, she reminded everyone in the courtroom, and by extension, everyone watching, that individuals matter. Their stories matter, and their rights matter. In today's world, many of us pass by individuals like Samuel without ever considering the deep-rooted causes of their struggles. Whether it's homelessness, poverty, or mental health challenges, it's easy to dismiss people who seem to be on the fringes of society. But Karoline's story teaches us that true justice lies in recognizing humanity in those who are often ignored or marginalized. It's about seeing beyond the surface and taking action to ensure that people like Samuel are not left behind. In choosing to stand up for him, Karoline made a conscious decision to reject the indifference that often characterizes our response to societal problems. Her decision was not based on convenience or the promise of reward, but on the firm belief that people who have been wronged deserve to have their voices heard. As Karoline entered the courtroom, she was faced with not just a legal battle, but a cultural one. The courtroom was filled with experienced attorneys, legal professionals, and a judge who had likely seen hundreds of cases in his career. Karoline, by contrast, was a young woman with no formal legal training, no lawyer by her side, and no powerful connections. On paper, she had no business being there, but what she lacked in formal qualifications, she made up for with passion and a deep sense of justice. She wasn't trying to outsmart anyone. She was trying to do what was right. From the moment she stood in front of Judge Renner, the odds were against her. The judge, though professional, was initially skeptical. He couldn't help but scoff at the idea of a waitress, a young woman with no legal background, challenging the city in a courtroom. It was a reflection of how often society dismisses those who are untraditional or unconventional. But Karoline's belief in her cause, in Samuel, and in the righteousness of her argument allowed her to push through the judge's skepticism. Her legal arguments were not built on technicalities or legal jargon, but on simple, undeniable truths. She showed the court not just what the law said, but what it was supposed to do. She made it clear that the law wasn't a set of abstract rules. It was meant to protect people, especially those who needed protection the most. Karoline's argument was driven not just by legal texts, but by a profound emotional understanding of the situation. Her connection to Samuel, the hours she had spent researching his case, and the time she had spent with him all came through in her presentation. She spoke not just as a person reading from a legal brief, but as a human being who deeply cared about the outcome. Her sincerity was evident in every word she spoke. And in that sincerity, Judge Renner began to see something he hadn't expected, a powerful argument driven by something more than just a need to win. Karoline wasn't fighting for her own gain. She wasn't trying to make a name for herself or achieve personal recognition. She was fighting for someone who had been abandoned by the system, and that was what made her case so compelling. The judge, who had initially laughed at her, was forced to listen, and as he listened, he began to understand that Karoline wasn't just fighting the city. She was fighting for what was right. In this moment, the case became something more than just a legal dispute. It became a reflection of how we, as a society, treat the most vulnerable. It was a test of whether we will look the other way when faced with injustice, or whether we will take a stand, even when it seems difficult or inconvenient. Karoline chose the latter. She stood up not only for Samuel, but for every person who had ever been overlooked or discarded by the system. Her actions showed that no one should ever be treated as invisible, that every person has a right to be heard, and that compassion can be a powerful tool for change. The culmination of Karoline's fight was not just her legal victory, but the transformation she inspired in others. When the judge ruled in Samuel's favor, it was not just a win for him. It was a win for all those who had been forgotten. It was a reminder that the system was not infallible, that it could be challenged, and that sometimes the most unlikely heroes are the ones who make the biggest difference. Karoline's victory was a beacon of hope, showing that when people take a stand for justice, it can create ripples of change that extend far beyond the immediate outcome. It wasn't just about one person's victory. It was about the triumph of humanity, compassion, and the unwavering belief that standing up for what is right can transform the world. In the end, Karoline's story is one of courage, not just in the face of legal challenges, but in the face of a system that often fails the most vulnerable. By standing up for Samuel, she showed that compassion and conviction are forces that can break through even the most entrenched systems of power. Her story is a powerful reminder that it's not enough to simply hope for change. We must actively fight for it, even when the odds seem insurmountable. In the courtroom, Karoline proved that one person, driven by kindness and a deep sense of justice, can change everything. Karoline Leavitt's story is a testament to the transformative power of compassion, conviction, and the courage to stand up for what's right. It reminds us that no matter our background, no matter how unqualified we might feel, each of us has a potential to create meaningful change in the world. Karoline showed that sometimes the most powerful force for justice isn't a lawyer's argument or a well-known figure. It's a single person who cares deeply and is willing to fight for those who have been overlooked. Her journey is an inspiring example of how small acts of kindness and unwavering persistence can lead to profound shifts in our society. reminding us all that no one is too small to make a difference. Good luck to all of you, and thank you for taking the time to engage with this powerful story. May we all continue to find the courage to stand up for what is right, and remember that the world needs more people like Karoline, those who will speak up, act with kindness, and make a difference wherever they can. Thank you.